on Planetary Health First, Mars Next. This is Michael Mann. I'm the host, moderator today. We're going to have a really spicy, awesome show, Digital Health at the Crossroads, growth or cannibalization, the good, the bad, the ugly with VCs. And we got a VC here. So we're going to have some good perspectives here. If we could just have some quick intros real quick before we get going. Tom, you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah, Tom Clues, great to meet everyone. The pleasure to be here. I've been doing corporate venture for about the last decade and a half. My background is investment banking, traditional financial investment world and private equity venture capital. I started at a firm out of Chicago called Adams Street Partners. I started my own company, sold that company. It was in the digital health space, sold it to a large multinational. And then over the last 3 years, I've run 3 sequential CVC programs. I started at Providence Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of Providence St. Joseph Health. I ran Qualcomm Ventures' healthcare program for about 8 years. Qualcomm had a remote patient monitoring business called Qualcomm Life. And so we incepted a joint venture with Novartis called DRX Capital. That was used for the purposes of merging deep tech and healthcare. And then over the last couple of years, I've been running the Natera program, Natera Ventures. Our goal is to take our tier 1 automotive supplier and manufacturing parent company and transform them into the healthcare space. So we've got a lot of capital under management, and we are deploying capital through minority and majority investments. We've deployed about $400 million since incepting the program. We've got about 16 portfolio companies, 1 acquisition. Really excited to talk about all this stuff throughout the panel, but excited to be here.
Awesome to have you. And Michael, you want to give a quick intro?
Sure thing. Pleasure to join everybody here. Thank you for hosting, Michael, and inviting me to this conversation. Looking forward to a provocative one, and one that we can raise the perspective on digital health to a different level here and where we are in the ecosystem. So I bring 20 plus years of digital health experience within the community around healthcare innovation and digital transformation, leveraging EMR optimization and clinical decision optimization tools to really look at that, moving the needle on cost, quality, and outcomes. And to do that right now, Visilier, as founder and CEO of Visilier, we're bringing AI and agentic agents into the clinical workflows. And we're trying to do that at scale, leveraging our partnership with NVIDIA and Microsoft Azure AI services. Bring that all together. We think we have the ability to create a platform here that really raises the bar on clinical validation of AI solutions. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and seeing how we are just getting out the starting gate, can really rise above some of the promises of AI and really deliver on what AI is positioned to do. So thank you.
Excellent. Dr. Lyle.
So Lyle Berkowitz, I'm a primary care physician by background, spent 20 plus years as a PCP and system executive at Northwestern Medicine in Chicago, focusing on IT and innovation. So my whole career has been some combination of clinical care, system executive work, and then digital health entrepreneurship. I've advised companies, I've started companies, I've run companies, and I've been doing telehealth a lot over the past 7 or so years. I helped run MD Live for a bit, and now run a company called KeyCare, an organization that is yet another national medical group. The difference is we're really focused on full primary care, not just urgent care. And we're building our tech stack is Epic. We decided instead of going against the grain or building our own, we'd use industry standard that allows us to easily coordinate our care with the rest of the healthcare systems using Epic. In fact, we've partnered with 20 Epic health systems already. And we are really interested in AI as a way to scale and increase efficiency of our doctors. I think virtual care is one of the easiest places to do AI. Everyone's already online, and it suits itself well, both because of how it's set up from a workflow and technology perspective, but also the type of stuff we're doing is a little more routine, rules-based that can work well with AI. So we are, we've built some of our own. We've partnered with third parties. We work with Epic, etc. to create our proprietary tech stack of using AI to improve efficiency and quality in what we're doing.
Awesome. Sergey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sergey. Good to see everyone. I'm the founder of Well AI digital health company, where we provide the unified virtual platform to patients and physicians, where they can use telehealth, nurse chat, and all these other good services. And AI is the big part of our solution. Some of the, or I guess a lot of the services we provide with our partner Chart to Chart, which is another great company. I'm also a creator of a Substack called AI Health Uncut, where I share my life experiences and also day-to-day what I'm observing and all of the problems and solutions that I am offering. My background is in machine learning, statistics, and math. Good to see everybody.
Well, this is awesome to have every one of you here. I really appreciate it. Where do we start with this VC good, bad, growth, or cannibalization? What is going on in 2025, with tariffs too, or no tariffs? All right, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I can't. I'll go
ahead.
for it. No, please, Sergey.
I think, obviously everybody's watching TV. So I think the economy and the uncertainty, it's also touching the startup world, especially in digital health a lot. I think we already had pretty significant changes in the IPO market for digital health companies. I think from what I'm observing, companies are getting more cautious, and so are venture capitalists. It's actually been going pretty much since COVID, and this year in particular, I feel like it's going to be another down year, unfortunately, for the IPOs, especially given the uncertainty. On the other hand, because of that, down or negative outlook for the IPO market that I'm observing, there are a lot of, or I guess more deals than usual in M&A market, and also things like secondaries and private deals. They're on the rise in digital health. So some pros and some cons in the market.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Sergey just said. I think there's definitely some M&A compression, or I call it non-existent M&A market right now. There's a lot of capital that's been deployed into digital health over the last decade, and there's been kind of a long queue of companies, good, bad, and ugly, that are looking for exits right now. I think as a result, this is a very trying time and is the deciding factor between good companies and bad companies, right? And unfortunately, there's companies that were good that just don't have sustainable business models, and they're just in a trying time right now because they can't seem to find acquirers. To your point, Michael, about tariffs, I think tariffs kind of may seem like a kind of a global trade issue, but we are seeing the impact on our portfolio to some extent. So we have a couple of device companies in our portfolio. Investors in not talking specifically to trade issues right now for these companies, but here's some examples of some companies that we have in the portfolio. We're investors in Alivecore, as an example, and companies like VivaLink, which are remote patient monitoring businesses, which have a device component. I think many digital health devices, they rely on semiconductors, batteries, sensors, all sourced from China, Taiwan, and other tariff-affected regions. So I think, we haven't. It's been a topic in every board meeting I've had since the tariff discussions got kicked off. I don't think we have all the answers. I don't think we've modeled the economic impact this will have on our businesses, but it's definitely kind of a hot topic here.
Dr. Lau, I'd love to hear your point, because you have such a long perspective as a clinician. I love the primary care experience. Internist, correct, by training, and been part of the telehealth experience. You're building a real healthcare practice nationwide. Where do you see your role with what you've seen with VCs? What I'd love to hear your perspective, your thoughts.
Yeah. So it's. First of all, I'll concur, right? We are hearing from VCs that their number one goal is to make sure their current companies don't run out of money. And if they're struggling for a variety of reasons, they're focusing on that. With that said, the second thing we often hear is we're only investing in AI from now on. And we're going to talk about that, right? Because me and every other service provider is like, really? Because I've never seen a technology, and yeah, Michael, you have to speak to this. I've never seen something get so commoditized so quickly. Sergey is the expert, but like 100. Yeah, I used to say 42. I think there's 124, however many ambient AI tools. And every EMR is coming out with their own.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they're so obsessed with the technology. I'm much happier being on the service side because I get all this great, cool technology, and I just see the cost going down and down and down as the technology gets better and better, which I love. That's great for me. So if I'm a VC, I'm like, should I be investing in technology or should I be investing in tech-enabled services that take advantage of all this technology? I was at a conference recently where, talking to a couple of the ambient AI vendors who were, saying, yeah, we're doing something special. It's not going to be a race to the bottom on price. And every single health system there was like, it is, And so I'd love to hear and this is a smart panel, what you guys think. But from my perspective, I'm very happy because this is an amazing explosion of technology, which we're getting, it's getting cheaper, better, faster for us to use. In the end of the day, I still get paid via E&M codes or other mechanisms to take care of patients. And the more efficient I do it, the better. I've often said, we don't have a shortage of physicians in this country. We have a shortage of using them efficiently. And I don't provide access to just a workforce. I'm giving access to a highly tech-enabled virtualist workforce to do as much care as possible, as efficiently as possible. So I'm ecstatic about all the money that's being thrown at these companies, but I also recognize there are only going to be a couple of winners. Maybe there's a philosophy that you throw as much money as you can at one company until they become the winner. But I still will be curious as how they're going to grow into their valuations when, ambient AI could charge $500 per doctor per month, 2 years ago, then 200, then 100, then 50, then 20, then they're going to give it away for free or pay us to use it. I'm not sure. But I'd love to throw that out there to the folks. And Michael, you're working on, I'm not sure how much you're building or repurposing, et cetera, tech, but I'd love to hear how you're going to compete and in a world where there's so much VC money being thrown at these things, but the tech's getting easier and easier every day.
Well, yeah, every point well taken here. If you look at the valuations just of the foundational models, your Claudes, your OpenAI, et cetera. If anybody from OpenAI starts their own business, it's built in valuation, right? And so those foundational models 2 years ago, were very nascent and they were changing how we look at AI. So I look like we're entering the fourth generation of AI. Some may argue fifth, but the first generation was probably 30, 40 years. The second generation was maybe 15 years. The third generation may have been 5 years. Now we're at less than 2 years, right, for each of these cycles to go through, and it's changing ever so fast. So the thought is that with the fast pace of innovation and the ability to build solutions, what I call the lumber that we get for free from the NVIDIAs, from open source, and whatever. So we have all that lumber, right? Now, what kind of special product are we building to sell at the flea market that's going to be different and unique? That's at the application layer, and that's the analogy I use. So everybody's got enablement. They got the lumber. They got the nails. What are they building with it that's special, that's differentiated? And I think as we move forward here, we're at the inflection point. And of course, you can go to the Gartner hype cycle and look at that. More smarter people than me have put those together. And so if you think about where we are, it's accelerating. But I think the adoption in AI tools is still very ripe in certain areas. We're looking at community-based care, rural healthcare, just thinking about the next generation of clinical decision support, Dr. Lyle. I'd like to get your perspective on that and how the assist with AI can be useful and accurate within a clinical setting at that point of care. And then thinking of the population health use cases for AI as well, where you start to get better at micro-segmenting populations and that delves into some value-based care use cases. So I think we have to go deep and narrow to get market penetration in the AI world and scale from there, if we can scale, horizontally. But the first step is deep, narrow laser focus, and then figure out how to scale. That's our sort of go-to-market strategy. But love to hear the perspective from you, Dr. Lyle, on the clinical decision support aspect of AI, and from others on if the trend towards in venture funding is going to continue to decline for the next 2 years, or when the uptake might start to happen again.
Well, I'll just speak briefly to me, the two most obvious cases for AI in a clinical workflow. One, to automate routine stuff, as efficiently as possible. And two, to be on the lookout for the needle in the haystack, right? So one is to use like ambient AI and other stuff to just, how do we take something that we routinely do a lot of and automate and make as efficient as possible. Number two is, how do we find that needle in the haystack that, how can AI be running in the background to identify that patient who might look normal, we might not notice it, to surface up that, hey, there's some, little alarm bell here, early warning sign, etc. Those two are both great things. You can have niches, and I'm a big believer also in general in starting a tech company, to own a niche first and then expand. What I struggle with is who's going to pay for it, and how much efficiency you're really going to get. Like, the problem is, traditionally, improved efficiency, in one of my old companies, HealthThinks, we did some of that. There's a market for that, but ambient AI, which proposed to do that, is a cool tech, and it's probably it's making people happier. Hasn't been shown to improve efficiency, but they've been willing to pay for it. But you're really going to have to figure out, the health systems are more likely, the doctors are more likely to pay for something that truly improves efficiency in the right circumstance. Improving quality is tougher. Decision support, early detection, like, who pays for that? It's a nice thing to have, but who's actually going to pay for it has always confounded us in healthcare. Because it's identifying who needs an MRI. Sure, health system may pay for that, but if it's improving quality and avoiding big complications, well, most health systems who are fee for service are not poised to pay for that necessarily. And we still yet to prove how well that stuff works. But so I'm a big fan of the concepts. We need reality to see what works, and then we need incentive alignment to figure out who's paying for these things as well. I'm curious what the investor and Sergey think.
Yeah, Dr. Lyle, I'm gonna kind of like riff on something you mentioned earlier that I've been thinking about now for a few cycles, and Michael, your comment about value-based care is very relevant here. So I think it's interesting. So we've got this kind of AI movement, we've got digital health, which is now AI, and the markets there are pretty frothy, I'll admit. And I'm not as eager to put a lot of capital to work there until, to your point, Michael, on the Gardner hype cycle. I think we're at a hype cycle right now. I think some might argue we're on a path to productivity, but I think valuations are still reflective of some hype. And I don't want to forget about why we do what we do, which is services. And Dr. Lyle mentioned tech-enabled services. This is an area we are very much doubling down on right now. We think human touch is resilient to disruption, right? There's just certain services that need to be done in a clinical setting with the patient and the physician or the clinician. And yes, tech enablement can be a big part of that journey for the patient and for the provider, but the services themselves are natural, that they need to happen, right? And we think tech enablement allows those services to scale smarter, scale faster, just like you mentioned, Dr. Lyle. I think that's an astute point. So we're looking at AI and software as how do we generate more operating leverage to some of these services businesses that we see. And so we're spending a lot of time in, believe it or not, wound care services. This is an area that we see as woefully underfunded. My grandfather died about 5 years ago from a very infected pressure ulcer. And that was a tragic accident. That was something that I thought would have been completely avoidable. Not sure it was really anyone's fault. It really kind of boiled down to There was a pressure ulcer there. Nobody noticed it. It got worse. He got infected, got sepsis. And so it's an area, you know, I think I'm personally motivated by, but professionally, we are sort of doubling down there. And we think that, you know, given that healthcare is messy, has a lot of nonlinear problems, we think that services lend itself to real world complexity. And we think that there's a services moat out there that combines the high touch service with a tech enablement layer. So that's where I'm really bullish on. I think it's been underfunded. We've moved away from services to some extent. Private equity firms are doubling down on services, but we're actually approaching it from a venture perspective and trying to build something very unique in that space.
Yep, Sergey.
Sergey, you're on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Sorry. From my standpoint, I think the market is very fragmented. I think we have this ocean of incumbents, being those incumbents payers, you know, EHR systems, PBMs. In my opinion, from what I'm observing, they all talk about technology, but when it comes to actually implementation, there are always obstacles, because a lot of these companies they tend to do things a certain way. They're profitable because, again, they have a lot of in certain cases monopoly power. So I feel like there's an ocean, this huge ocean of opportunities, but it's kind of like being guarded by this incumbents. And then we're in digital health. Sometimes it feels like we're playing in this small pond, and we're developing something. Looks like we're making some good progress, but then if we don't get through to the ocean, and we can talk about obstacles and why that is. I feel like in many cases it's really hard to scale, and therefore we have a system, in my opinion, now where as Dr. Lyle mentioned, we have 126, in my calculation, probably more now, AI scribing tools. I've looked to a lot of them just basically wrappers against around the.
We lost you again, Sergey.
Sergey, we lost you.
So
no, you're. It looks
you're
like
on mute. Yeah.
Hear me now?
We got you now. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, something with my mic. I'm sorry, technical difficulties. That's where technology should have helped.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I was interrupted there, but
I think you were saying about basically a lot of rappers probably using ChatGPT.
126 scribes, scribing tools.
Scribes in my calculation, and I just had an article about that. It's actually a series of articles, but the point is, in an industry where it's really easy to make money just by building an app in 24 hours and then selling it in a very specific market, to me, that's not sustainable. And the only reason those companies exist is, again, because the market is so fragmented. I feel sometimes that the incumbents actually want it to be fragmented, because, if we are in this small pond, in this, everybody's serving a practice or a couple of practices and clinic, and then another app serving somebody else, I almost feel that incumbents actually want that. This is how they, in my opinion, keep the power. I think long term is not sustainable. I still believe that innovators are gonna prevail long term. But in the meantime, we have this weird situation where we have so many what I call AI tourists or wrapper companies, and it's just fascinating.
As you're saying that, though, Sergey, I do. Yeah, for someone like who's been around since the dawn of the EMRs, there are still like 350 EMR companies, unbelievably, right? And they're making, they make enough money to get by. The difference is many of them were sort of homegrown. They didn't get a bunch of venture financing. So it will be interesting if you do your analysis of how many of these AI companies have taken venture finance and therefore have to sort of have an exit versus, smart guy who makes something, doesn't take financing, and they can make a couple $100,000 a year. They might be happy with that. It'll be interesting if we still have that many EMR companies. How many AI companies might we have? And is the difference whether or not they took investment, if they've been bought up by a bunch of PEs, etc. I don't know the answer, but it just hit me that that would have been a place you would have thought consolidated a long time ago.
And we have the data to all of that. Off the top of my head, obviously most of them, especially VC based, ironically enough, not making any money. They're kind of like kicking the can down the road, especially the ones backed by VCs. They have some cash, some capital to do that. So again, it's not sustainable. And second reason, we all have to look behind our backs, like what the big tech is doing, and the big tech kind of are looking at saying, we're not going to do anything now because it's just not worth it. The market is so fragmented. They want to ideally come and just take the whole thing, but we're all looking behind our backs, like what is, what's Google gonna do? What's Amazon gonna do? And that's always a scare. And for all I know, they can just come in and wipe the whole market.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now they have better opportunities. They see so much distortion and negativity in healthcare, and they're just waiting on the sidelines for now. But that's a big elephant in the room.
Sergey, when you say fragmented, are you talking about proliferation of point solutions within a provider space? Is that what or data, or what is your perspective there on fragmentation?
Yeah, fragmentation, it could be, as you mentioned, point solutions, which again, I think is in many cases like telehealth. I don't think it's sustainable, and we are already observing that. Doctors, they don't want to have 150 APIs pointing into different directions, creating potential security issues, etc.
Mm-hmm.
They just, I think more and more, they just want more integrated solutions. And that's what they're willing to pay for. Fragmentation could be geographical. I don't see any kind of, for example, AI scribe company serving nationally, for instance. They're all in little niches.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think from a standpoint of incumbents like payers, that's the good place to be. They don't want somebody's growing too fast, to threaten them. So they're like, if you guys are okay in this fragmented market, fine with us. And if somebody threatens, by the way, a lot of these companies, like in the AI scribe case, as I was saying in my article, all of a sudden they come up with their own. They're saying, what, we're just going to undercut you. So all of a sudden they're like, once they feel the threat, they either acquire the company, or they, in the case of Commure, for instance, they all of a sudden they acquired Agmatics, and I'm like, where's Agmatics? They don't have it anymore, right? All of a sudden they're like, what, we don't need it. So the reason they seem to me they acquire sometimes just to get rid of a competitor. So
yes,
it's a lot of that going on also. So it's a lot of interesting things, but definitely it's an interesting industry compared to some other industries I've looked at. To me, a lot of unhealthy developments, and that's very troublesome.
So Sergey, it's interesting, right? So Dr. Lyle talks about 350 EMR companies out there. That number just really pops out at me, because the only EMR company I hear about time and time again is Epic, right? Mm-hmm. And so you would kind of think that, given, and I've heard different numbers about Epic's market share out there, right? I've heard 80% market share, 40% market share, 60%, huge range. Undoubtedly, they're a leader in the space. And so you would think that type of consolidation in the what would be called the digital foundation of healthcare would yield more consolidation and create more leadership positions chosen by Epic, right? Given that they're sort of foundational layer. Are you, what's your take on where the fragmentation comes from? And then, is there real fragmentation on a digital layer basis, or is it sort of perceived fragmentation, given there's lots of options and it's hard to differentiate between the options?
Yeah, I think providers, as you said, they right now it's hard to differentiate quality versus noise. They see a product, it looks nice, it looks shiny, seemingly does what they're asking it to do, and so they buy it. So it's, I think, a lot of geographical stuff going on. Yeah, I have no idea why there's so many EHR companies. I also hear about Epic. I think, again, it's maybe old legacy stuff. I cannot imagine all of them are profitable.
Yeah.
Probably 90% probably not. Yeah, so it's, I think, a lot of old legacy stuff, a lot of maybe hospitals and maybe even independent clinics kind of doing stuff they used to do, and so a lot of those companies still exist because of that relationship. Again, to me, unsustainable. But in the meantime, yeah, we see this fragmentation still.
Mhm.
Right. And one thing, so it was a leading question, kind of, right? Because thinking about how, take fire, okay, came along, and fire should be paved the way for interoperability, and I think it does a pretty good job at that. But now move that, some of those fire transactions, say prior auth, into the agentic world, and it renders like something like Da Vinci already perhaps obsolete. And I don't know if you're following that, but I think the whole, document transaction and data transactions with, say, the prior auth will be subsumed by agents that'll carry that forward in a way that's automated and patient centric. It looks at the payer rules and then evaluates those rules against what the prior auth is and automates that whole process. So I think there's a lot of, as a overlay of fire, you have the model context protocol getting to technology here, which allows that agent-to-agent communication so that the API layer is much less complex. So you're orchestrating microservices through different open source tools like MCP, like LangChain, and you're able to bring these experiences in a much more efficient way. So I think that enables a platform such as Visalier, okay, others like it, to really focus in on that experience, the experience of who this is designed for, and make that experience much more engaging, much more deliberate, and have the ability to show value within the context of a transaction. And as you multiply that over and over again, you start to gain credibility. And looking to others on that perspective, but I think there's a whole sort of shift from what we think of a Fire API query into the agentic world, and how it's going to streamline a lot of the tech that we build on top of, say, a clinical workflow or a payer to provider transaction, or whatever the use case may be.
Yeah, maybe for the API issue, I think maybe I'll delegate it to Dr. Lyle. From my perspective, there's still a lot of inefficiencies. I think the picture you've described, I agree that that's the future. AI, facilitating those integrations, those API connections, AI agents, I think that's the future. That's not happening right now from what I'm seeing. I mean, we've had Fire since it was introduced 2014. We have dozens of companies that all they do is provide Fire connection, which
Right.
to me it tells me that there is no efficiency there still to this day. I think with the HR companies I've been dealing with, and again, maybe Epic has a different story, but they still push for their own APIs because they're making more money there.
Yeah.
They will accept the standard, but they will create all sorts of obstacles. So by law, they have to implement Fire, but I mean, it's just not very efficient. Like, compared to what's happening in technology, when I can just 5 seconds API to OpenAI, for instance, we're far from that kind of 5-second hookup situation. And understanding, of course, that healthcare is not just kind of hooking up your app. It's more complicated, but still, we're far from that picture where AI agents gonna help you right away to establish those API connections.
And one last point on that before you, Lyle, is the vector representation of that data, right? So we can consume Fire, land it wherever, then have that vector representation. So that's what creates the onboarding for the inferencing. and we map that with clinical knowledge graph, then we have something that we think at Visilator could be valuable in the marketplace. That's our path, but we'll see how that works out. Go, Lyle, after you. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'm excited. I mean, when it came out, I was excited. So I'm still excited about the standard. To me, I think compared even to other countries like UK, having something like that, like standardized, that's definitely helping against, in my opinion, some of the processes that some of the incumbents are establishing to maximize their profits. So absolutely, like something like that is necessary. I'm just saying it's still not being efficiently implemented from what I'm seeing. But let's just find out from Dr. Lyle.
Well, I'm not as smart as you guys on these desks, but I'm going to take us back about 25 years and talk about what I think was a fundamental mistake that was made that resulted in all these issues, and see, can we learn anything from that? For those of us who remember, the early 2000s, the government came up with this idea of meaningful use to incentivize EMRs. And they had a choice. There were two camps at the time. And I was, and I tell you which one I was in. The camp that won said, let's incentivize meaningful use of the EMRs, the outcomes. That here are the things we want. We don't care. We're going to be pro-capitalistic. You invent whatever EMR you want, but you have to show that it can do these outcomes. That it can have a med list, that it can result in increasing flu shots or preventive care guidance, etc. And everyone was not everyone, but the people were happy with that because that felt good and very American, that we're going to endorse creativity. The other camp, and for those of us, and again, I think that I was in this camp, I can't say, but I'm going to say I was in this camp, was that instead of endorsing these outcomes, what we should be incentivizing is a common data model, because we all knew what was going to happen. You're going to have hundreds. In fact, I just looked up, it's 600 EMRs out there, EMR and PMS systems. Now, 80% of those are 3 of the EMRs, right? It's still, Epic, Cerner, Meditech, Athena Health, as big as they are, still only 2%. The big ones are consolidated like anything, like auto manufacturers and everything else, but there's 600 software out there. And the problem we had is we gave all this money to all these companies, and then we blame Epic for being proprietary, but everyone's proprietary. Everyone created their own data model, and we endorsed it. And so what can we now, flash forward, we're stuck with that. And so now it's created a bunch of interoperability companies who are making a ton of money, right? In our perfect, storm, that there are tons of companies that make money on trying to help with all this interoperability. If you try and shut them down, they're going to be upset. But the truth is, the one reason we went with Epic is because we know so many others are on Epic, and Epic does, because it's a common data model, it can share the data. In fact, they had to create a whole new system, what they call Care Everywhere functionality, that made it really easy to share data. Now, my Epic instance is different than Northwestern's or others' instance, but our data models are the same, and it allows for data sharing. And other EMRs don't even have that. I think Athena can do that, but most EMRs actually, allow different users to maybe adjust their data models, and they certainly don't have easy data sharing. Care quality and TEFCA, et cetera, will allow for some of this, but there's no question, sort of like us using Microsoft, or Google or whatever we use, no matter what, even though there's ways to share stuff, nothing's quite the same as it being inherently on the same data model.
Yeah.
And last, they've, when small companies are building AI tools, they're always looking at, well, how and where do I work with Epic and a couple of the other big ones, because that's going to be mostly where the business is. Now and then you might have a company that goes, I'm going to niche into these small other companies, but they'll never be a huge business.
Understood, Lyle. Would you agree that the FHIR data model and the US CDI is helping the problem that you've identified with the proliferation of the meaningful use? It was good intention, but you're notwithstanding the data model, FHIR did go a long way, in solving that. Whether it's adopted or not, a FHIR server in every EMR or how the queries are done is another story. But does FHIR come close to this universal healthcare data model?
I don't know. I'm a doctor.
Okay.
I know some tech. I hear it. It certainly hasn't cured it. right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, it's probably improved it, but you guys are all much smarter than me on that topic. But what I can tell you is there anything we can learn from that? What happened with good intentions that got us 600 different data models. Now, what can or should we be doing differently now? I don't know if there is anything to do differently to accommodate that. And I'm not sure if is it as simple as fire, TEFCA, etc. Certainly that's going to help, but it's not going to be the super easy answer.
And,
No, if someone can come up with a business that just provides interoperability to all the CHRs, that's right there is the best business ever. I think Fire was, in my opinion, the move in the right direction.
yeah.
I think from what I'm observing, EHR companies, hate Fire and standards like that because they lose money on that standard because they have to adhere to that. As opposed to something that was more profit maximizing for that. But still, I think for that exact reason, there's so many obstacles and inefficiencies to this day. And it's been 11 years now. So if somebody can come up with a solution that basically solves all that, I mean, that's like the best investment ever.
We did some Smart on Fire apps years ago. It worked in the same app worked in the Epic environment, the Cerner environment. That's a sandbox we had. Would it work in Bob's EMR? I don't know, right? No idea about the small EMR. It should, right? But you have to configure it differently because they might not be fire compliant. That EMR might not. So you have to just configure it differently. But one thing to go back to the AI, one big thing we notice is the inferencing. The inferencing is key to this. And when we plugged in some of our data into the NVIDIA inferencing, we got much more richer results. So having that inferencing layer is one of the other aspects to AI that is crucial in making sure you have a chance at enlightening a doctor on what the next step should be for a patient or how to best analyze population health data or patient data at the point of care. But it's obviously the data pipeline matters, but once you get it there, it's the inference engine that's really the core of all this. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to have the least intelligent to say about this, but I can tell you from our advanced wound care strategy, we're making a play at acquiring an advanced wound care business. They built their own homegrown EMR. We've had this sort of Fire conversation with them and how Fire is currently used within their ecosystem. And I think to answer your question point blank, I think Fire is a major step, but it doesn't solve all of the sort of data management piece. It doesn't touch on interoperability very much. That's kind of the biggest weakness of it in my mind. And I think to kind of wrap this around AI, and this is how we're thinking about AI in the context of all this, is we think AI at a high level can supercharge Fire's potential. And one of the key findings that we've noticed in assessing this acquisition target, and I won't name the name of the company, and we're actually seeing a lot of the acquisition targets we're looking at in this space are having very similar issues, where between 40 to 60% of the data has gaps. They've got missing fields. They need to harmonize records. It's a mess. The resolution is there. The data resolution is there. All of the ICD-10, ICD-9s, the CPTs, everything is there. It's quite robust, and it's going to serve as a foundational element for us to build what we're trying to build is a precision medicine platform for advanced wound care. So we're trying to build the world's first precision medicine wound care protocol for advanced wound care. About 67% of advanced wound care therapies fail. We're trying to bring that down significantly. And so obviously the data set that we start with has to be accurate, it has to be robust, and it has to be a very reliable data set. So we're looking at these like 10-year longitudinal data sets, and what we're trying to do is we're working with an AI firm that we know and trust, that we made an investment in, to help us kind of harmonize the data, fill the missing fields, detect the gaps, create that sort of interoperability layer. So fix the existing data and then see what we can do on a go forward basis to make sure the data is more harmonized and interoperable. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it, and fascinated to hear you guys talk about it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, similarly with the wound care, we want to get into chronic conditions that say it's a clinical knowledge graph. It could be
Yep.
It could be data from registries, it can be data from journals, whatever it is, but it's really rich data that can just enhance the generative AI outputs of a chat about your patient panel, or it can enhance any population health type of query prompts you may do, or solutions, or care management, right? So all of this can lend itself to creating that additional layer where I'm sure many hospitals have really smart clinicians at the top hospitals. Some regional hospitals would love to have access to some of that brain power, brain trust, right? Because you see more patients at the top. Nothing about those doctors. You just see more patients, have more data, and have more exposure to different types of comorbidities and disease states and different patient panels, right? So if you bring that at the surface to any workflow, it can only enhance that patient outcome, ease clinician burden, and have a better quality of care. And this is what we're thinking of. And going back to my first talk, it sounds like I'm boiling the ocean. We have to dive into a use case that proves out our platform with these kinds of concepts, and then expand from there. So the takeaway here is a clinical knowledge graph with the inference engine, along with that patient panel data, and think you have a platform that lends itself to some clinical intelligence that otherwise you wouldn't have.
Very cool.
So where do we go from here with this topic? We're kind of wrapping up towards the end. Any sort of takeaways that any of you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, for me, first of all, I learned a ton. I recognize that FHIR is foundational building block to figuring out this universal healthcare data model. But kind of referring back to our mothership, which is an automotive company, just using FHIR, it's like building highways without cars. You need AI, you need additional tools to make it a reality. And so for me, my biggest takeaway is digital health. Capital markets and digital health, old school digital health, are a little bit on the tougher side, very fragmented. The M&A markets are a bit wonky at the moment, but I think AI is supercharging some of this. And at least from my perspective, it's all about tech-enabled services, and I'm looking at services as a moat, and then how can AI supercharge that and make patient delivery higher quality, lower costs, and better outcomes and all that good stuff. That those foundational elements to triple aim from my perspective.
Well, man, this has been an awesome show. Really appreciate all of you coming on today.
Thank you, Michael. It was a great experience as well. My parting thought is really around taking what we have as the source of truth in healthcare is around the patient, right? And the more data we can bring to any patient encounter and leverage it in a way, going back, somebody said needle in the haystack, finding something that could be missed from the daily routine of going through patient after patient after patient in a clinical setting, where this can enhance that, and taking that a step further, where we think about partnering with big tech, and they've opened their doors, and it's a great relationship we have with NVIDIA, right? And so we have those tools. It's incumbent upon a startup like us to make use of that, and to really appreciate it and just dive into it, because they make it available. It's tech enablement at scale, and I think it's something that we are going to leverage quite well here at Visilier. That's our plan, but we appreciate the tech enablement from the big players, and we look forward to working and partnering with them, because this is an ecosystem that you can't build it alone, right?
On my side, I wish we had a better capital allocation system. I think a lot of capital is being allocated suboptimally. I hope doctors will be involved more in digital health, because they certainly invest in areas like real estate, but not as much as digital health. I think they would be much more knowledgeable investors compared to our traditional venture capital, for instance, and that may help promote innovators, as opposed to, I think, what's happening a lot right now, as we talked over this last hour about AI tourists and people who are basically copycatting everybody. So I hope we're going to move in that direction and remove some of those inefficiencies. And my last thought is that I'm a believer that especially AI is going to transform healthcare. I think it's a matter of time. It's probably going to take a while. But one area where it could help right now, I feel like, is rural health. Even the technology, no matter how imperfect it is right now, it is still better than not having any answer for some of those folks that are away from medical facilities, away from doctors, and just having access to, through their phone, for example, to that AI that could help them. I think we can do it right now, and I wish that's where it's going to go.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great day and great conversation. Really appreciate you guys coming on today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.